Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And wherever you are in this wide, wonderful world, you are very welcome to the Global Sales Leader Podcast. I am your host, Jason Cooper. I'm a sales strategist, sales coach. I inspire people to deliver better results through relationships that last for the longevity. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Bill Flynn. He's flown over the other side of the world to have a little chat with me today, and you're very welcome. So I'm very excited, as always, to speak with some interesting people, some people that have something different about them. So, Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. Good to be here. I've definitely been called different, so I guess I fit the bill.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. A little bit of blurb about you. Bill has collaborated with Alan Mulally. If I pronounce that, that sounds like a very Irish surname, which I can never pronounce. Pitched Steve Jobs, accomplished much, failed, and often learned many useful lessons from 30 years of studying the science of success. He's described pragmatic as the new Simon Sinek, or Simon Sinek with a different face, mouth, and everything else like that. And Bill embodies his purpose, simplified by spending each moment to help create compassionately productive by enabling enlightened leaders to focus on a few things that truly matter. You have a wonderful book out as well, which we'll discuss in a little while. Nice. You're also catalystgrowthadvisors.com, and you got lots of stuff on there, but I'm not going to read it and reel it all off because you're going to do that and not me. So Bill, could you tell me, describe what you do and all of this sort of anchor points along the way to get to where you are today?
Certainly. So I help leaders take the guesswork out of growth, which is the subtitle of my book, which basically means I try to help people who lead teams and organizations to understand that for the most part, we've been taught how to do this wrong. And the data bears me out. Most businesses fail. You have a 50-50 chance of making it 5 years if you start a business. You have a less chance as you stay longer in business. So that's sort of my goal, is to take this is probably the last chapter of my life, so to speak. And I want to spend as much time as I can helping as many people as I can to understand that there's a better way to do this. It's actually easier and less stressful, but we were not taught that. What got me here is kind of, there are two arcs to my career, if you will, or to my work life. Is I did startups forever. I did startups from the early 90s through to 2015. I did 10 of them, all here in the Boston area. And the track record was pretty good, 5 for 10 or 5 for 7, depending on how you count my contribution to a few of them. But either way, both pretty good numbers, considering most startups fail. There's like a 10% rate. And then about 5 years ago, give or take, I started my own coaching organization. I asked myself, do I want to do an 11 startup, or do I want to try something else? And I'd love to do an 11 startup. I love startups. They're fun. I love the whole clean sheet of paper and trying to figure something out. But I had this experience between startup 5 and 6 where I basically became a coach and really enjoyed that. I didn't know I was a coach at the time. I wasn't smart enough to know that's what I was doing. And I employed a system as well. And again, I wasn't smart enough to know there were lots of systems to choose from. I made up my own because I was ignorant, and it worked great. And I wanted more of that. So I've been doing that for 5 years, and now I know what a calling is. Calling is when you do it for free, and I will, and I do it for free. I still get paid. Even though I'm 5 for 10 in startups, I'm not independently wealthy. I still have to work for a living. But I've done really well, live in a nice town out here in Massachusetts, and my daughter went to private school and all that kind of stuff. I have a 1%er kind of life, which is nice. But I would do it anyway. This is so much fun.
Yeah, there's a thing in life called passion. And exactly what you just said there. It's there's certain moments in your life that you just find it or it follows you, and all of a sudden you go, this is exactly what I wanted to be doing all of my life. Why didn't I find out about this earlier? So that obviously relates to yourself. And I totally concur with you, because I've been involved with several startups as well. Some of them have failed miserably, and some of them have actually gone on to be okay. But, it's that buzz and that excitement So finding your purpose and finding your passion, how did you find that? What happened along the way?
Well, I think so. I'm also a neuroscience geek, and generally, there's this guy Cal Newport who talks about don't follow your passion, figure out what you're good at, and generally that's your passion.
Yep.
And whatever he studied, and he's written a couple of books on it, and he's written Deep Work and some other things as well. And I think he's onto something, because I was at least aware enough to recognize, when I mentioned that earlier between startup 5 and 6, that I wanted more of that. That was cool. It wasn't exactly what I was doing. And then I sort of sought out how would I be able to do that? How would I be able to manifest that? And I was a little trepidatious, because I was never a CEO really. I was a GM. I'm a CEO now, but I'm a CEO of one, so I don't really count that.
No, that's all. You still count that one.
Yeah, I can have the title. So I sought it out, and then as I got to doing it, I just found, and once I get in front of clients and was able to sort of share what I've found out, the good stuff and the bad stuff. Right, I've made a ton of mistakes, so I'm happy to share that.
Yep.
And I've always been sort of Socratic in my approach to things. And I think that really helps being a coach, because every now and again, of course, I will slip into the consultant, right, or the advisor. Yep. But I'm very deliberate. I say, look, right now I'm taking off my coach hat, and I'm going to tell you what I've experienced.
Yep.
And so you can add it to the mix, because it hasn't come up in the conversation.
Yeah.
But mostly I'm just asking questions and trying to pull out from them what I believe they already know how to do. There's this guy, Alan Fine, he wrote a book called You Already Know How to Be Great. And I think that's true. We just get in our own way. So my job is to just sort of get rid of all the crap that's getting in your way. Because my favorite saying, and I say it all the time, is few things truly matter, but those that do matter tremendously. And my job is to help you figure out what are those few things that really matter to your most important constituencies, your employees or your team members, and your customers. We don't spend enough time in those areas. We're too busy doing, and we're not spending enough time thinking. So
I think we all need to have a coach, and including myself. I'm a coach. I'm a certified coach. I'm a certified trainer. I work in the area of sales and business growth, but I believe that I need a coach as well. I need a mentor. I've got a couple that I work with, but the only way that, because we don't know it all. If we did, we'd be up there floating around with a big beard and calling ourselves God. I know. Sorry, you have a beard there, don't you? You're almost there. So. But, it does take a little bit of time. But asking great, wonderful questions and finding out the purpose of others is a skill. Because, again, you need someone to quiz it out of us and ask us the right questions. Yep. So you've obviously done a great job there. So I'm always intrigued about your methodology. So tell me a little bit about that, because or your approach.
Yeah. So how I work with my clients, and so this is a sales thing. So I'll start from maybe pre-acquisition.
Okay.
So what I did is, and I've been a VP of sales 8 times and a head of marketing twice. So I've got a lot of experience. I've built multiple teams from nothing. Often I was the first salesperson in many of these startups as well. So I apply that to here. And the first thing, I think the way to make everything easier in sales is to really understand why people buy from you, and then how to recognize them.
Great.
And figure out the process to do that, because it's hard. So what I figured out for me was that the best client is a CEO or a head of company or business owner, whatever, the head of something, because the head of the organization hires and fires me. I work with the whole team, but the head of the organization hires and fires me. Is they need to be humble, they need to be a learner, and they need to be comfortable challenging the status quo on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And once I understood that, then I said, where do those people hang out? So I became a Vistage speaker. I work with some organizations that sort of are purpose-driven organizations or mission-driven organizations. So that's where they hang out. And of course, as you do it more, your existing customers give you stuff. I've also found partners that have done that as well. But I don't take on any client. I pick my clients. And it sounds great now because my business is much better than it was. But 2.5 years ago, I was a struggle because I started from nothing. I had no clients. I didn't even know really what I was doing. I didn't really have a methodology. I just sort of I have experience, but taking what you know and turning it into something that people can understand is difficult.
Yeah.
So I had no money. I basically had no clients for a year and a half, and it was, my lifestyle didn't change, so it was just all money going out. But so what I do is I bring the CEO or the head of the company through a process. I do bring them through 3 steps to make sure that I'm finding out if they're humble, if they're learners, to the best that I can, because you're really trying to get inside their head.
Absolutely.
I don't care what business they're in, as long as they can afford me. I can help anyone who's open to it. So that was my process, and I've either rejected or fired as many people as I've brought on. And that's really paid off because my clients stay with me for years. My oldest client pre-COVID was 4 years. They were in the study abroad industry, and they got hammered. So they had to lay off 90% of their workforce and said, "Look, we can't afford to pay you." And I said, "Don't worry about it. You guys are great, and let's just keep talking." They were just in wartime mode, and really struggling. But I've spoken to them a few times. So that's sort of my process. And then what I do is I teach them a growth framework. Once they come on, I teach them the growth framework, which is basically thinking of the business as one big system made up of multiple smaller systems, sort of like a house, right? A house is really one big system. And especially in terms of the envelope, in terms of keeping the cool air or the hot air in or out, it's very similar. There are multiple components that are part of it. And depending on what you're good at, et cetera, it can make up for what you're not good at in other areas. So the 6 systems, there's actually 7, but the main 6 systems are a cultural system. So, what we all talk about, right? Purpose, values, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the leadership system, which is really the senior leadership team and getting them to be cohesive and be able to fight in a healthy way. Then there's the talent system, which is about really A players or B+ players, getting as many of those people as you can, because they're the best investment you'll ever make in your business.
Absolutely.
They're 3 times more productive than everyone else, and you don't pay them anywhere near that rate. And then there's strategy, execution, and cash. And those are the 6 main systems. And then I also do what I call a foundational system, which is about the leader really creating a vision and making sure that it's very clear and vivid. And then having a change in decision-making framework that you use on all your key decisions. And then what I call neuro leadership, which is really understanding that everyone's crazy. We're all crazy. We're all highly impulsive, irrational, emotional beings.
Absolutely.
And you need to understand that as a leader. And you're also the same. And I think what happens if you really get that, you become much more compassionate. Because you realize that our brain is working against us a lot more than it's working for us, because it thinks it's somewhere else, right? It's in the dark silence, and it's the last upgrade it had was between 10 and 50,000 years ago, when we were barely clothed and walking around on grasses. It doesn't understand all this stuff. And so it's acting as if it's there, which is mostly in survival mode. And we make bad decisions because we put our brains into threat. Especially we put those of others into threat without even knowing we're doing it. So that's what I teach at a high level. It goes in a lot more depth, and it could take me, I've done it in 4 hours before. So it could take, so it can go a long way, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. And a lot of it's in my book.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, because I've studied neuro leadership, neuro-linguistic programming and psychology, and I love neuroscience. So I completely understand our minds are in constant fight, flight, or freeze mode all the time, and we're constantly fluctuating between the two. Then our neurochemicals in our brains, cortisol, dopamine, and endorphins, and all of the other things that are floating around,
all those things
in our head all the time. So we how we engage and how we trust people, and sometimes how the threat and the other things comes in. The cortisol freezes up, and we sometimes make irrational choices. But we
often make irrational choices.
Yeah, we often make. So it's good to really sort of simplify this process and help people actually understand this. So how do you actually engage people when you're first doing this and you're speaking to a client? Because I know for myself, I know what it's like because you explain this. This is neural leadership. This is how would you do that? Putting myself into your shoes here.
So I explained to them at a very high level the basics of your brain really has two main jobs, and each of them supports the other. The main job is to assess threat or reward. Our brain, supposedly, there's research that says 5 times every second, our brain is saying friend or foe, safe or not, threat or reward.
Yeah.
So that's what it's doing on a regular basis. So the story I tell to sort of epitomize that for people is one that either we have experienced ourselves or we inadvertently did ourselves, which is, and I'll do it with you. So imagine you and I are in a meeting and I'm running the meeting and you're my boss.
Yep.
And the meeting ends and you're thinking, that Bill needs some help. So what you do is you get up and you tap me on the shoulder and say, I have some things I want to talk to you about, Bill, about this meeting. Can you follow me back to my office? What happens?
Your heart.
My brain, my heart goes because your brain is saying threat.
Yep.
And when it knows threat, the reason your heart starts to beat is because it's moving blood to your limbs so you can get the hell out. Yep. Right? Run away is what it's telling you. You'll start sweating because it's working really hard. There's all these things going on and you're in this fight, flight, or freeze mode. And it gets worse because now I'm following you back to your office, right? In the 20 feet or the 50 feet or the whatever it is, or the elevator ride, I am now catastrophizing because that's what my brain is doing is don't die. What are all the things that could go bad? Let's avoid those. So I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? One of my friends and peers going to think of me now that I'm being sort of sent to the principal's office? And am I going to get fired? If I get fired, then what's going to happen? The kids can't go to college. And we're going to have to sell the house and have great vacation. So I'm doing all these things. So by the time I get to your office, my brain is completely in threat mode. And no matter what you tell me, I'm not listening. I'm not really listening. So even if you tell me good things, it's just not something. If you ask me 10 minutes later, I probably don't remember anything in the conversation. Now, what you could have done, which is different, which is you could have said it's the same thing. You could have sat down next to me and said, hey, Bill, that was a pretty good meeting. How do you think it went? And I'm like, yeah, it went pretty good, et cetera. He says, you know what? As you know, one of our core values is Kaizen, continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to do is I'd like you to put something on my calendar, lunch or coffee or something, and let's talk about this meeting. I'd like you to bring 2 or 3 things that you thought went really, really well in the meeting. And we should do more of or keep doing. Maybe 1 or 2 things that now that you think on it could have gone better. I will do the same thing. And then you and I are going to meet every week after this meeting until we agree that this is about as good as this meeting is going to get.
Yeah, agree.
Same thing, but now my status isn't affected, my certainty isn't affected, my autonomy, my relatedness, and my fairness are not affected, right? I have put you into it. At least I haven't put you into threat. Maybe I haven't put you into reward, but at least I've left you in this state where you're not in threat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I teach them.
So how as sort of leaders, because you spoke about, you touched on communication there. How can leaders now be a little bit more effective at what they do? Because now we're at home, our heads are going into overdrive anyway, because we're stuck in 4 walls and we're not seeing our peers as much as we ever used to. I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but we're in level 5 lockdown here. I'm not sure when we're going to go down, maybe in the next month. Right. So how do you think the best way of communicating a little bit more effectively?
So COVID is different than if this weren't a health threat, right? Yeah. So there's that, so first you have to make sure that you understand that everyone is, COVID is like the future. It's everywhere, but it's affecting everyone differently, right? Mm-hmm. And people are in 3 general threat modes, either just general threat mode, which is what we're always in, which is we all know that life is not guaranteed. You could get hit by a bus or your heart could go out. So there's always a general level of that, but we can live with that because it's normalized. Yeah. But then there's sort of the threat in the neighborhood. Maybe friends of yours got sick or died or family members. So even though it's not with you, it's still there. And that's sort of a yellow threat, if you will. And then there's red, which is, someone in my household has it, or whatever that is, whatever your thing is. So all of your team members are thinking differently about this. So you have to understand that and really understand what each of them is in terms of that. So putting that aside, in general, there are a lot of studies out there that talk about we just, as human beings, we're not much different than when we were children, even though we're adults. We want attention.
Of course.
And by the way, we would rather have negative attention than no attention. Obviously, you want positive attention and useful attention. So what you want to do is you want to create as much of an environment where you're providing attention because you're an authority figure. You're checking in with them, checking on their family, and and being compassionate and thoughtful about what's going on in their lives. But also, you want to give them. For many people, they're not in control. So give them something that they can control, but it also has to be meaningful to them.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can give them something that contributes to a purpose larger than themselves and they have control over it, then that will at least start to tamp down this constant threat they're in. You're certainly not going to solve all their problems and that kind of stuff. But it helps a little bit. Obviously, people are fearful, maybe less so now because we're a year in, and if it hasn't happened by now, it probably won't happen. But early on, people were like, is a business going to stay in business? Am I going to keep my job? I mean, there were all these other threats as well. So I would make sure that you set up an environment where you're paying attention to them, and you're creating an ability for them to connect with themselves or with other people whenever you can. We have all these virtual cocktails and just hang out, and maybe you can I know Dory was on here. I went to a virtual cocktail party with her, and she and Alyssa Cohn had a very specific thing. It was an hour and a half long. There were 7 or 8 of us, and we all talked about each other. And there was a question we had to answer, and we got to know each other. And I've made a couple of friends from that cocktail, right? And I'm following. So it's nice. You can do the same kind of thing. I like the idea of obviously we're on Zoom a lot, but try to be on Zoom as little as possible. But maybe there's an open channel. Maybe there are 2 or 3 hours each day where everyone just gets on Zoom, but you're not having a meeting.
Yeah,
you're just doing your job, and then you just look up and say, "Hey, Jason, can you answer this question for me? Or what was that thing that we talked about last week?" Just so there's at least a feel that you're looking over the cube or you're doing whatever it is, so you sort of feel like you're connected. Any way you can do that, I think, is helpful to your team, because you're just trying to minimize this threat that is everywhere, as much as possible. So that would be what I would recommend that people try to do.
Awesome. Like, this is the Global Sales Leader podcast, and we're pushing this out throughout the world to give some really good golden nuggets of knowledge, advice, information. So what do you reckon is a really great strategy for sales leaders right now to engage with their staff to really motivate them to go out there and smash their targets and whatever else? Because I'm big into sort of getting people motivated, getting people out there, but I'm also big into building long-term relationships with your peers, but also the staff to get them moving forward. Always interested in other people's points of view as well.
Sure. So I'm always been a bit of an iconoclast. So I don't think you can motivate anyone. A motivation is an intrinsic thing. So you have to create the conditions for motivation, so people can then feel like they're energized, right? So the first thing I always do, I've been a global sales leader a few times, and I've studied, what is really your job as a global sales leader? What really, when you're doing your job well, what things have you done? And I found that it's really 3 things that you do really well when you're a global sales leader. One is you hire really well. Is you really figure out who the best kind of people are for whatever it is you're selling. So for a startup, I always looked for 3 things, which was I looked for someone who was highly curious. And I sort of weave that into my interview and other things. I also wanted people who are compassionate. And to me, compassion is empathy with action, right? They can do their best to try to figure out what's going on with the other person, and they're driven to do something about it. Because you can have empathy, but if you come to me and say, oh, I had a bad day or whatever, I say, oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I totally understand what you're doing. Here's my experience, so I know what you're doing. And that's it. That doesn't do anything for you. If you're in sales, then maybe you made a friend, but they didn't buy anything from you, probably.
Yeah.
And the lastly is I sort of say it as driven, but it's really, they have to be entrepreneurial. And what I mean by that is they have to understand, especially in a startup, that they should treat their territory or whatever this thing is they have, their patch, as their own business.
Absolutely.
And so I created an interview process that tried to figure that out. Really hard to do, right, in an hour, 2 hours, or whatever. But once I was not a good hire of salespeople for a while, and then I kept asking, why is that? And so I dug in for those things. So you hire really well. You can teach them how to sell your product. So what I did with startup guys is I said, I'm not going to interview anyone unless they've been number 1 or number 2 at a previous organization at least twice.
Yep.
I said, don't give me any resumes unless they're there, because I can't afford to also teach them how to sell. Whatever their style is, whether they learn Sandler or Radar or whatever thing that they did, I don't care. As I said, I only have 2 rules as a sales leader: be honest, be responsible.
Yep.
You can make 1 million calls or 10 calls as long as you make your number. We can argue whether your number's fair. I'm happy to have that conversation. But once we're on it, you got to figure out how to make the number. That's totally up to you. So you got to hire well. The next thing is you do have to train and train and train and train.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not just you, figure out ways for them to help each other and create this environment where they're always learning from each other. Most sales leaders inadvertently create silos of salespeople who don't want to help each other because they think that other person's a competitor. Where you have to understand it's a rising tide methodology and approach that you should have. And then if everyone gets better at what they do from learning from other people,
absolutely,
the team will be better. And the last thing is capacity. You need to understand how to build capacity. So if you know that your average salesperson brings in $2 million a year, and it takes 3 months to train them, it takes 3 months to hire them, and then they're at quota in 9 months. Okay, great. Now you know how to build capacity, right? Hire really well, but you got to hire in front of it. You got to go through the process. And if the CEO or the team decides we have to have this much in revenue, you have to figure out, okay, how do I do that? I have this many people, I need this many more, etc. Yep. There's other stuff you can pull, the levers of conversion rate and size of deal and work with marketing. That's harder to do. So you have control over those things: hiring, training, and building capacity. You have complete control over that. And yes, I would absolutely work with marketing. I'm a big fan of stop solving the problem that's in front of you to solve the problem that's causing the problem that's in front of you. And keep doing that. Keep going back. Eventually, you'll figure out how to find the best customer, what to say to them, what they care about, etc. It'll make sales so much easier. But we don't do that. We generally try to solve in the middle. With, I just need to hire a lot of people. I need to tell them to get out there and make the calls and whatever. And I think that's not motivating. No. If you work with someone and you tell them how to make it really easy to sell, they're motivated, because salespeople are like water. They're just going to find the easiest way to get to their number.
And that's the way our brains work. Is our brains wants to find the easiest path.
Exactly.
We're lazy. That's the way that our brains and conditions. And I do like the approach is we learn off each other, because if you're making the number, what are you doing to do that? I want to find that out. And in the big organizations, I'm going to mention HubSpot. I went down there. They're based in Dublin. They've got a big organization, but what they do once a week is they share around. They have a meeting, but they share best common practice, and then they have a central base where they write down, this is what I did this week. Come and have a coffee with me and find out how I've done it. And then they become a coach and they teach others the way this is what works. And I think that coachable mindset, that not the fixed mindset, which is the Carol Dweck, the open mindset, where everyone's open to learn and everyone's open to sort of feed off each other, and having that continuous training is absolutely awesome. And you mentioned the power of 3. So linguistically, when you influence and persuade people in whichever area of communication or what you've done is absolutely incredible. So I like that framework, because that works for me as well. I that sits in. Do you have any other golden nuggets that you can
For
share?
whom? I have lots of them. Where do you want me to go?
Oh, whichever one. Because I want to make sure that everyone that listens to this takes one thing out of it. If they take a whole flurry of knowledge, then we've both done our job.
Tell me who your main audience is. What do they do?
Well, my main audience is they're an eclectic array of different types. They're entrepreneurs, they're salespeople, they're sales professionals, they're sales leaders. They want to make an impact. They want to make a difference in the work that they do, but they want to communicate a little bit more effectively with their clients, or to build better relationships with their business, their internal stakeholders, or whatever it might be.
Sure. So so the way I look at the world of business, I look at it in terms of functions. And in most businesses, there are 4 key functions. There is the marketing function, which is getting people interested enough to want to engage with a salesperson, which is the next function, selling or sales. Then there's some sort of operations function, delivering whatever it is, implementing, building. You can say there's manufacturing as part of there, but that big. And then there's finance, which is, okay, you have to get paid for this thing. Those are the 4 main functions of most businesses. And that's usually in what's called a cash conversion cycle, and you want to see how long that is. So if I'm working mostly with the sales function, there's one book that I think is magic. And it took this guy 20 years to write it. And he finally did. It's called The Man's Side Sales 101. His name is Bob Mesta. And he tells you over 30 years of doing this. So he's one of the progenitors of Jobs to be Done. He worked with Clayton Christensen in the 80s and 90s to get the thing going. And he's helped 3,500 products, including Casper Mattress, Snickers, a number of others, a lot of things. And what he basically understood is that people don't care what you do. They only care what you do does for them. Yeah. And if you as a salesperson can figure that out, and then obviously go and try to figure that out with your client, but I will tell you, most of the time, the marketing people don't know it either. And then you need to feed that back to them and saying, here's what I'm hearing out in the marketplace, right? And the best example I've ever given, and which I think really illustrates it, and most people understand it, is Waze, right? So I'm in my mid 50s, and I've been in the internet since 1995. So pretty early on. The World Wide Web was born in 94. So and there was this map which was great. It was called MapQuest, and they had a great map. And then Google made a better map, but Google just made a better map, but they didn't ask, why do people use maps? And one of the jobs that we hire maps to do for us is to get from point A to point B on time. And that's what I think the guys at Waze asked that question. And they said, well, how can we build something that solves that problem for them? And obviously it was 2000, whatever it was, 12 or 13, whatever it was, 7 or 8, 9 years ago when they first started. And so they said, oh, we got gyroscopes and accelerometers and all this stuff, and we got phones and we got all this social stuff. So they said, what we should do is create this thing that is real time, because I don't know if you had a commute, but when you use Google Maps or anything, it was always, I used to have to commute into Cambridge or Boston, which is a horrible commute. And you get this information and you'd be like, okay, do this. And then it's completely wrong when you get there because it's 20 minutes behind. So much can happen in 20 minutes, right? So I'd be sometimes late for work for like 20, 30 minutes because, I follow a thing. Where Waze, it's
instantaneous, isn't it?
It's amazing. And it keeps you updated. It changes your route on the thing. And I've only had it steer me wrong twice, no pun intended. And I commuted for years and years and years, and it would save me 10, 20 minutes every day because it would move me around. And Google bought them for over $1 billion 5 years in. They were, I don't even know how much money. I don't think they were making more than, maybe $1 million, a few $1 million. And they bought them for 1.3 or 1.6 or some huge amount of money because they figured out what is the struggle? What kind of progress are people who are buying maps trying to make? Yep. And that's your job. You're in a unique position as a salesperson. You're in front of these people and you can ask them these kinds of questions. It's not the perfect thing because they're always wondering what you're trying to manipulate them to say, so you can say something.
Yeah.
But if you're good at it, and I got pretty good at it, they will tell you stuff that is really useful, and it might just be a change of messaging. You know, so that would be my other nugget, is really, and buy that book, read that book. It's got super good stories in it. I don't know if you've read it yourself.
No, I haven't actually, because I thought you was going to say Napoleon Hill, Think Rich, Grow Rich, because you were starting to go, and I was going, I know what you're going to do, but no, I've
read that. That's fine. No, Bob wrote a practical book. He took 30 years and 3,500 products and wrote a beautiful book that tells you how to do it. It's not just one of these wave your hands. I love Simon Sinek, but he doesn't actually give you anything practical to do. He's just like, hey, you should know this. Good luck to you.
See ya.
Yeah, you know, which is great. We have to at least have awareness of it. But I love Bob, and that's what my book is. My book is about doing stuff, right? I give all these stories, but then I have 25 exercises to go with my book, so you can read a chapter and then go to my website and download the thing, and I give you instructions. And you know, you won't do it as fast as if you hired a coach.
Yep.
And it's not everything you could do, but it's these few things that I think really matter that will get you the furthest, the fastest. That's the name of the book.
Awesome. So a question I'm going to ask is, what is your creative space? So if you had a place that you just sat down and go, bang, got some ideas here, how do you use it?
So I think anyone's creative space is where you are allowing your brain to relax. You know, again, neuroscience, there's something called weak signals or the edge effect, which is where the best ideas come from. And it's because you've allowed your brain to relax. And most people get their best ideas running or in the shower or whatever. So whatever that space is, for me, it's actually in this room. I love this room. I live in just outside of Boston, in a very historic part of the country, right? Concord and Lexington are a few miles away from me. And if you can see the paneling behind me, there's an inn called the Wayside Inn, which isn't quite as famous as the Colonial Inn, which is in Concord. Yeah. Which is where, you know, George Washington slept and some of the patriots slept, you know, during the Revolutionary War. And the paneling is a replica of what is there. And I have a beautiful fireplace here. So in the winter, you know, it's just a wonderful space. It's very calming. So this is where I do, you know, I take naps here, you know, whatever. It's my space where most of the stuff that I think of comes to me. But what I've also done is since I've learned a lot about neuroscience, is I found that when something comes to me, no matter where I am, I stop. I'm like, okay, this is something, and let's work on this for whatever's going on. If I'm on a Zoom call and something happens, I just turn off my camera and, you know, whenever I can. Or I've been at a conference where, you know, like the speaker said something and I'm like, and something popped in my head. I just tuned him out and started writing. You know, so to me is recognize when it happens, when you get the insight, and take that time to at least record it. You might want to come back to it later and refresh it and replenish it a little bit or expand upon it. But that's what I would say about creative space. So physically, it's generally this room, but I don't think it has to be.
It can be anywhere. I'm the same. I go out running or go cycling, and I come up with bang. I've got a really good idea, and I'm running along. So I have to get my phone out of my pocket and I have to record it, or I send myself an email so I remember it later. So I've got it in my head.
Leave yourself a voicemail message, whatever it is. Yeah. Right, because your brain doesn't. What'll happen is it'll distract you. Right, you have to get that out because your brain doesn't like it. Likes closure, and if you don't do that, then it's either going to you won't remember it, or you won't. It'll distract you throughout the day. You know, I always say if you get a great idea, just write it down and go back to what you were doing.
Yeah.
And then also it plants a seed to your brain, and that in the background, without you knowing it, it starts to work on the problem.
That's right. That's why the best time to write stuff down or read is at night, because if you plan at night, I use a planner and I write my day ahead, and that's it sitting in the subconscious. I'm thinking about it overnight. Exactly. So throwing you back a question and distracting you completely. If you had a superpower for 5 minutes and you had a magic pill and all of a sudden you went bang, what would it be and how do you utilize it? Selfish or unselfish?
Yeah. So my purpose in life now is to help enlighten leaders to make a difference, right? I want to change the slope of that curve that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So to mine is, I would like to, I don't know if it's mind control or whatever. I would want the ability to take the stuff that I've learned, at least the most important stuff, and feed it to all the leaders in the world and help them understand that there's a better way to do this. It's easier on you. It's better for your employees. It's better for your customers. Most of our adult lives are spent at work, and most of us are miserable at work. And that's unfortunate. So let's change that. Not only will you make your business better, but you'll make the lives of the people that work for you better. You'll make the lives of the people who live with them. I think it has this huge rippling effect. So that would be the thing, is I would want to say, if I can distill everything into mine in 5 minutes and just jump it in, download it into everybody and have them go, oh, now I get it, right? And then they start doing that. Because this isn't me. I've studied business for 30 years. I'm not telling you this is how Bill does it. I'm telling you this is how Alan Mulally does it, how Bob Chapman does it, how Steve Jobs has done it, Herb Kelleher. I've studied dozens, if not hundreds of leaders and found the ones that consistently were good. And they do the same few things really, really well. And it's not any different from leader to leader. They do it in a different style.
Yeah.
And that's my book. That's why Further Faster, right? Vital Few Steps is just the name for the Pareto principle. It's the law of the vital few is the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
They're all the same thing. To me, live your life 80-20. What is it? Your best customers are 16 times more valuable to you than your regular customers.
Yep.
Get more of those. Sell more stuff to them.
Absolutely. So thanks so much. Today, you've been listening to the Global Sales Leader. Just a little plug to your website, if you want to say what it is.
Sure. All my stuff is there. My book, you can download my book for free. I'm about the message, not the money. But hey, if you want to get me $4 or $5, from Amazon or Audible, great. But you can download it from my site for free. And 500 people or so have bought it or downloaded it, which is great. I'm pretty psyched about that. It's called catalystgrowthadvisors.com. My contact info is there. A lot of exercises are on there. And I have a book list of all the things I've read. I've read hundreds of books over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've given the best 100 by category. There's a lot of stuff on there. So please use it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You've listened to the Global Sales Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper, and I've had Bill Flynn today giving some wonderful ideas, some wonderful golden nuggets to feed forward to enrich your life and help you learn and grow, because this is what it's all about, learning and growing and to develop yourself to be more exceptional at what you do. Thank you once again, Bill.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Really appreciate it. It was fun.